3 days ago, something shifted in the way you see the world. You might not have caught it in your conscious mind, but your body definitely felt the change. Maybe it was a talk that just didn't connect like you expected, or a choice you made that left you feeling kind of empty inside, even while you were making it. Perhaps you noticed yourself going through the motions of your own life, instead of actually being in it. That shift wasn't some kind of glitch in your system. It was actually the first tiny break in a mental cage you've been building stronger every single day through a process so sneaky, so constant, that you've been treating it like it's just how things are. What I'm getting ready to show you isn't just another system for bringing things into your life or expanding how aware you are. This is about a very real biological thing that's going on in your head right now that decides if you see the world as stuck and scary or flowing and open to change. And what kicks off this whole process isn't what you think it is, not what you believe, not even what you consciously pick. The real trigger is where your focus lands when you get scared. Scientists who study how we respond to scary stuff have found something that totally goes against what psychology has been saying for years. When the fear center in your brain picks up on possible danger, your brain doesn't just get ready to fight or run away. It actually changes which parts of the world around you that you're even able to see. This isn't just some metaphor, it's actual measurable shifts in how you process what you see, recognize patterns, and predict what's coming next. The part of your brain that handles vision literally blocks out stuff that doesn't look like a threat. The part that deals with sound turns up noises linked to danger while turning down everything else. Your sense of where your body is in space shifts to focus on signals about keeping yourself safe. Within about 200 milliseconds after fear kicks in, you're not taking in the complete picture of what's actually available to you anymore. You're only getting a threat-focused slice that's been optimized for staying alive when there's immediate physical danger. This whole system developed for situations where threats were clear, didn't last long, and got handled through doing something physical. There's a predator hiding in the bushes. Your system detects the threat. You do something about it. The threat goes away, and your perception goes back to normal. But the way humans think now has taken this old mechanism and turned it into something that never stops running. You're not using this fear response just for the occasional physical threat anymore. You're using it as your main way of dealing with anything uncertain, complicated, or unknown about your own life. Every time you look at your bank balance with that particular kind of worry, you're switching on threat mode. Every time you scroll through social media with that background feeling of not being good enough, you're turning on defensive filters. Every time you walk into a social setting already looking for signs that people are judging or rejecting you, you're shrinking your ability to see things down to just scanning for threats. And here's the part nobody really talks about with this pattern. When you look at the world from a place of fear, it doesn't just filter what you can see. It actually helps create and lock in the exact outcome you're afraid of. This isn't some magical thinking about attraction. This is proven brain science about how our brains adapt and predict things. Your brain works like a prediction machine that builds models of what's probably going to happen next by recognizing patterns from what happened before. When you're looking at things from fear, you're constantly feeding your prediction system information that says a threat is about to show up, danger is here right now, bad stuff is likely to happen. Your brain takes all that input and fine-tunes your whole perception and action system to get ready for the threat you're expecting, which means you literally can't see information anymore that says the opposite of the threat model. Proof that you're actually safe gets thrown out as not important. Chances to do something good that don't match your fear-based predictions become invisible to you. Options that would need you to let go of the threat model can't even show up in your awareness. You're not experiencing what's really there and then reacting with fear to what you see. You're creating a fear-filtered version of reality through looking at things with fear, then experiencing the limited slice you've made as if it's the whole truth. The quantum science language that gets used in spiritual spaces is mostly people misunderstanding metaphors, but there's one real connection worth looking at. In quantum mechanics, measuring something affects what you're measuring. The act of watching influences which state becomes real, from all the possibilities. In the science of how our brains predict things, watching from a specific emotional place limits which patterns your brain predicts, and therefore which parts of reality you can even detect. Looking from fear creates perception that confirms fear, which makes predictions that reinforce fear, which produces experiences that match fear. Not because the universe is matching your energy, but because your nervous system has turned into a closed circle that can only process information that backs up its threat models. I can point to the exact moment this pattern got switched on in your growth as a person, not through reading your mind, but through knowing how human nervous systems react to certain conditions during development. Between the ages of 2 and 7, your brain was building its basic models for how reality works and what keeps you safe. During this time, something happened that taught your nervous system an important lesson. The world isn't naturally safe, and you need to always be on guard to survive. This didn't need to be some big dramatic trauma. It could have been ongoing low-level unpredictability. Parents whose moods changed without you seeing it coming, a setting where you couldn't count on things being stable. Times where you learned that dropping your guard led to getting hurt, let down, or left behind. Your young nervous system made a totally logical adjustment. If reality is basically unsafe, then staying alive needs constant watching for threats, never fully letting your guard down, never completely trusting anything, always keeping a baseline of fear-tinged alertness. That adjustment helped you out. It helped a little kid handle uncertainty when you didn't have much power or resources. But the adjustment created a habit of seeing things that's still going decades after the original situation changed. You're still looking from fear, still filtering everything through threat detection, still shrinking your ability to see things into defensive patterns. Not because what's happening right now needs it, but because those brain pathways are deeply carved in and running on autopilot. And every day you keep this pattern going, you're making stronger the exact filters that stop you from experiencing the changes you actually want. Here's what this looks like in specific things you do that you've probably never connected to fear-based observation. You check the same information over and over throughout the day. Email, bank stuff, social media, news. You tell yourself you're staying in the know or being responsible. But notice the actual quality of how you're checking. There's an energy of searching, a need to verify, an underlying worry that something might have changed that needs your defensive attention. That's not gathering information. That's scanning for threats. And every time you scan for threats, you're teaching your nervous system that reality is dangerous and can't be predicted, which makes stronger the fear-filtered perception that creates more worry, which pushes you to check compulsively more. In the comments, drop one word that captures the energy you're choosing to carry forward. Maybe it's alignment. Maybe it's ease. Maybe it's power. Maybe it's something uniquely yours. Let that word be a small but profound declaration. A signal like a quantum seed you plant not just in this space, but in the quantum field. You practice difficult talks before they happen, planning what you'll say, thinking through responses, getting your defenses ready. You call this being prepared or being thorough. But look at the emotional quality of the practice. It's not creative exploration of what could happen. It's defensive practice runs, rehearsing how to protect yourself from threat you expect to come. Every mental practice from fear makes your brain's model stronger that conversations are dangers to protect against, instead of connections to explore. Which means, when the real conversation happens, you're already in defense mode, filtering everything through threat detection, missing the actual human being right there with you because you're too busy looking for attacks to defend against. You have certain people, subjects, or situations you don't make contact with. You keep these avoidances going through convincing, logical explanations. It's not worth the drama. They wouldn't get it. There's no point. But under the logical story is a fear-based prediction. Getting into this will create threat, and staying away keeps me safe. The avoidance feels like protection, but it's actually locking you in a perceptual prison. Every pattern you avoid engaging with becomes a threat you have to keep avoiding. which means your world of actual experiences gets smaller and smaller as you pile up more situations that need defensive non-engagement. The process I'm talking about has been studied a lot in anxiety research, but what it means goes way beyond just clinical anxiety. This pattern works in highly capable people who would never call themselves anxious. It shows up as perfectionism, taking on too much responsibility, getting stuck overthinking things, and ongoing low-level stress that feels normal because it's been there so long. What makes this pattern especially tricky is that fear-based observation feels like being realistic. When you're filtering reality through threat detection, the evidence keeps backing up the filter, which makes the filter feel like truth instead of a choice. Breaking this cycle doesn't happen through positive thinking, or saying affirmations, or trying to force yourself to see things differently. Those ways fail because they're trying to override the fear-based observation with conscious intention, which creates a fight inside yourself and usually makes stronger the defensive pattern you're trying to change. The shift happens through a completely different mechanism, not by changing what you observe, but by changing the quality of attention you bring to observation itself. There's a specific state your nervous system can access that brain scientists call the ventral vagal state. In this state, your social engagement system is turned on. Your threat detection is properly calibrated instead of being overactive, and your perception opens up to include a wider range of information beyond just threat-related data. Most people touch this state by accident during moments of real connection, creative flow, or when busy with something that genuinely interests them. The state feels like safety, openness, curiosity, and being grounded, all happening at the same time. What's almost never taught is that you can learn to turn on this state on purpose. And when you observe from this state instead of from fear, your entire relationship with reality changes, not slowly, right away. Here's the practical starting point. This isn't imagining things or a meditation technique. This is direct nervous system work. Right now, bring your attention to your breath out, not controlling how you breathe, just noticing it. Specifically, notice the very end of breathing out. That short pause before breathing in starts naturally. In that pause, your vagus nerve is most active. That pause is a doorway into activating your parasympathetic system, the body's opposite of threat response. Stay with awareness of that pause for 10 breath cycles. You're not trying to achieve anything or feel different. You're simply present with the natural pause at the end of each breath out. What you're actually doing is training your attention to rest in a body state that can't exist at the same time as fear-based observation. The pause at the end of breathing out activates ventral vagal tone. Attention, without trying to do anything, lets you be present with that activation instead of immediately moving past it. But before we move forward, I want to invite you into something real. If you've been feeling like something's making sense, and if a part of you is realizing your own power, tap like if you just had an aha moment, because like attracts like, and subscribe. Stay with this space. Grow with us. After 10 breaths, notice how your body feels, not judging if it feels good or bad, just registering the actual sensations that are there. This is your baseline before conscious work. Most people find out they carry way more tension and tightness than they realized. That baseline tension is maintained fear response, your nervous system holding a defensive posture as its normal state. Now, here's where it gets interesting. From this slightly more balanced state after breath awareness, on purpose let your attention move towards something you've been avoiding thinking about. Not forcing yourself to deal with it, just letting your awareness point in that direction. Notice what happens in your body the instant you begin getting near the avoided stuff. Specific tensions show up. Particular contractions turn on. Your breathing pattern likely changes. These physical signs are your fear-based observation system kicking in. Stay present with those physical sensations without trying to change them or figure out why they're happening. Just direct, simple awareness of the actual body experience of fear turning on. This is the critical point where most people make the wrong move. The gut reaction is either to push through the fear and force dealing with the avoided material, or to back away and return to safety. Both options keep the fear-based observation pattern going. The third option, the one that actually creates shifts, is to stay present with the physical sensations of fear while not engaging with the mental story about why you should be afraid. Fear as a body experience is just sensation, tension, tightness, temperature changes, activation in your gut or chest. Those sensations aren't dangerous. They're just information about your nervous system's current state. But fear, as a thinking experience, is a story about threat, a prediction about bad outcomes, a narrative that the sensations begin to shift and move instead of staying locked in static defensive patterns. The activation starts to complete its natural cycle instead of staying chronically stuck. You're not overriding fear or rising above it. You're allowing your nervous system to finish the defensive response it started, which it couldn't complete because you've been stuck in observation of the threat instead of resolution of the activation. This practice directly goes against most fear management teaching. You're not breathing to relax. You're not reframing to feel better. You're not using thinking techniques to talk yourself out of fear. You're staying present with the direct experience of fear activation while pulling attention away from fear's interpretation of reality. And in that specific setup of awareness, the fear-based observation pattern loses its hold. Not permanently on first try. This is skill building, not a one-time breakthrough. But each time you practice observing your fear's physical signature without engaging its thinking narrative, you're creating new brain pathways for how to be with uncertainty. After working with this practice for 3 weeks, something shifts in how you move through daily experience. The constant low-level scanning for threats begins to quiet, not because you've convinced yourself you're safe, but because your nervous system is literally receiving different information. When you stop observing from fear, you stop creating the filtered reality that confirms threats. When you stop confirming threats, your prediction system resets itself. When your predictions reset, you start seeing information that was always there but couldn't register through fear-based filters. Chances you were blind to become visible. Connections that seemed impossible show themselves as available. Creative answers to problems that looked unsolvable come up naturally. This isn't positive thinking creating better results. This is removing the filters that were blocking huge ranges of actually existing reality from showing up in your awareness. The people around you will notice the shift before you fully recognize it yourself. They'll describe you as more present, more relaxed, less reactive. They won't be able to say exactly what changed, but they'll feel the difference in your energy. What they're actually sensing is that you're no longer broadcasting constant defensive alertness. Your nervous system has begun working from secure engagement instead of chronic threat response. And because human nervous systems are designed to regulate together, your shift allows others to relax in your presence. But here's what you need to understand about this process. It will feel wrong at first. Decades of fear-based observation have convinced you that constant alertness keeps you safe. When you begin releasing that pattern, your conditioning will insist that you're being irresponsible, naive, or dangerously unprotected. That resistance is the fear-based pattern trying to keep itself alive. It will create compelling evidence that you need to return to defensive observation. It will find examples of threats you missed. It will create worry about dangers you're not preparing for. You have to recognize this resistance as the pattern's survival mechanism rather than accurate assessment of reality. The fear isn't protecting you from danger. It's protecting itself from disappearing. The actual test of whether you're ready for this shift is simple. Can you handle the groundlessness of not knowing what will happen without immediately reaching for defensive observation to create fake control? Most people can't. They need the false certainty that fear-based scanning gives, even though that certainty comes at the cost of being locked in limited perception. But if you've read this far, if something in you recognizes the mechanism being described, then you're already beginning to loosen the pattern's hold. Recognition itself is the first stage of letting go. What happens next depends entirely on whether you're willing to practice observing your fear without believing its stories. That practice won't get rid of fear from your experience. It will transform your relationship with fear from defensive identification to curious awareness. And in that transformation, reality stops being something threatening that you must defend against and becomes something fluid that you participate in shaping through the quality of attention you bring to observation. This is the quantum shift that begins when you stop observing from fear. Not quantum in the mystical sense, but in the sense that your measurement tool changes, and therefore the reality you measure transforms. You've been collapsing infinite possibility into fear, matching limitation through the act of fearful observation. When you release that pattern, possibility, the question isn't whether this mechanism is real. The research is clear. The brain science is solid. The process is documented. The question is whether you're willing to do the uncomfortable work of staying present with fear's activation without letting fear drive your observation of reality. That choice, made moment by moment over weeks and months, determines whether you remain trapped in fear-filtered perception or step into the vastly larger reality that exists beyond your defensive filters. The shift is available. The mechanism is accessible. The only barrier is your attachment to the false safety that fear-based observation pretends to give you. In the comments, drop one thing that you deeply desire. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's a happy relationship. Maybe it's a healthy and fit body. Maybe it's something uniquely yours. Let this be a small but profound declaration, a signal to the universe you send, not just in this space, but in the quantum field. There's something else going on beneath this fear observation cycle that most people never identify. Your body has been keeping track of every unfinished threat response since you were a kid. Each time your nervous system turned on for danger but couldn't complete the response cycle, couldn't fight, couldn't run, couldn't finish the activation, that incomplete energy got stored in your body tissues as ongoing tension. This isn't a metaphor. Scientists studying body-based experiencing and trauma work have documented how incomplete defensive responses create holding patterns in your muscles, connective tissue, and automatic nervous system. Your shoulders carry decades of braced protection. Your jaw holds years of things you didn't say in response. Your diaphragm restricts from thousands of held breaths during moments of frozen fear. These stored patterns create a baseline of activation that your brain reads as evidence that threats are present. You wake up already tense, already defended, already scanning. Not because anything threatening is currently happening, but because your body is still responding to threats from years or decades ago that never got finished. This creates a nasty cycle. Your stored tension signals danger to your brain. Your brain makes threat-based predictions. Those predictions create fear-based observation. That observation confirms the threats, which makes more tension, which signals more danger. You've been trying to think your way out of a pattern that's stored in your body tissues. And thinking approaches alone can't access these body holding patterns. You need embodied practice that allows the stored activation to complete and discharge. This is why the breath-based practice I described earlier is critical. It's not just calming your nervous system in the moment. It's creating the body conditions where stored defensive activation can finally complete its cycle and let go. When you stay present with fear's body signature, without engaging the thinking story, you're allowing your body to finish responses it began years ago. The tension that's been chronically held can finally move and shift. The tightness that's been maintained as protection can release. This release doesn't happen all at once. Your nervous system is too smart to dump decades of stored activation suddenly. It happens gradually in layers as your system develops trust that it's safe enough to let go of the defensive holding. But here's what you need to understand about this process. As the stored activation begins releasing, it will feel like things are getting worse before they get better. Emotions that were frozen with the original incomplete responses start coming up. Memories you haven't thought about in years suddenly become present. Physical sensations that seem random or hard to explain show up. This is not going backwards. This is resolution. Your system is finally processing what it couldn't process when the original activation happened. The fear that comes up during this phase isn't new fear. It's old fear that's been locked in your tissues, finally moving toward completion. Most people misread this activation and decide the practice isn't working or they're doing something wrong. They return to their usual fear-based observation because it feels more familiar than this uncomfortable release process. But if you can stay with it, if you can keep present awareness while your system discharges stored activation, something extraordinary happens. The baseline tension that's been your normal for years or decades begins to genuinely release. Your default state shifts from chronic low-level threat activation toward actual relaxation. And when your baseline state shifts, everything about how you perceive and engage with reality transforms. You're no longer reading the world through the filter of unresolved defensive activation. You're perceiving from a genuinely more settled nervous. This is when the quantum shift becomes undeniable. Not because you've changed your thoughts or beliefs, but because you've fundamentally altered the body state from which you observe reality. Your measurement tool has reset. The reality you measure reflects that reset. There's also a social piece to this shift that deserves attention. Your fear-based observation pattern didn't develop alone. It was shaped through relationships, particularly early attachment relationships, where you learned whether the world was safe and responsive or threatening and unpredictable. The people closest to you have adapted to your fear-based patterns. They've learned how to interact with your defensive observation. They know which topics to avoid, which responses create less activation, how to navigate your threat scanning tendencies. When you begin shifting out of fear-based observation, those relationship patterns become unstable. The people around you will unconsciously try to pull you back into familiar dynamics. Because your shift destabilizes their own adaptation patterns. This doesn't mean they're consciously trying to mess up your growth. It means human nervous systems are connected, and when one system shifts, it creates pressure on related systems to shift as well. That pressure creates discomfort, and the unconscious response to discomfort is to bring back the previous balance. You'll notice this as subtle resistance from people you're close to. They might criticize your new practices as selfish or not practical. They might increase behaviors that previously triggered your fear-based observation. They might become unusually needy or distant in ways that pull for your old defensive patterns. This is the relationship field trying to keep its familiar organization. Your job isn't to convince anyone or defend your shift. Your job is to stay anchored in your own nervous system balance, while the relationship field reorganizes around your new baseline. Some relationships will adapt and deepen. Others will naturally fall away as the fear-based dynamic that held them together dissolves. Both outcomes are necessary parts of the shift. You can't maintain fear-based observation in your life just to keep relationships that need your defensiveness to work. The relationships that survive and get stronger through this transition are the ones capable of meeting you in genuine engagement rather than defensive coordination. These become your secure base as you continue releasing fear-based patterns and building capacity for open observation. Make sure you share this video with your loved ones. Remember, you are not just sharing, you are spreading positive energy, and that positive energy will help you manifest what you commented earlier. There's one final piece that determines whether this shift becomes permanent or stays a temporary experience. You must develop what researchers call distress tolerance, the capacity to stay present with uncomfortable activation without immediately moving to fix or get rid of it. Fear-based observation is fundamentally an inability to tolerate distress. Uncertainty creates discomfort. Your system moves to get rid of that discomfort through defensive scanning and threat-based prediction. The scanning and prediction create an illusion of control that temporarily reduces the distress of not knowing, but that strategy keeps you trapped in fear, filtered perception. True freedom requires building the capacity to tolerate not knowing without immediately reaching for defensive control strategies. This doesn't mean becoming passive or helpless. It means telling apart productive action based on accurate assessment from defensive action based on fear-driven need to eliminate uncertainty. The practice is simple but seriously challenging. When you notice discomfort showing up, pause before moving to fix it. Stay present with the actual sensation of discomfort for just 10 seconds before taking any action. Those 10 seconds of tolerance build capacity. Your nervous system learns that discomfort isn't dangerous. Uncertainty doesn't need immediate defensive response. Not knowing can be tolerated without collapsing into threat-based observation. Over time, this capacity grows. 10 seconds becomes 30, 30 becomes minutes. Eventually, you develop the ability to stay in genuine uncertainty for long periods without your system triggering fear-based observation patterns. This capacity is the foundation of the quantum shift, because when you can tolerate not knowing, you stop collapsing possibility space too early. You can observe reality without immediately filtering it through threat detection. You can engage with uncertainty as exploration instead of danger. The shift I'm describing isn't a destination you arrive at permanently. It's a capacity you develop and maintain. That option never disappears completely. But what changes is your relationship with that option. Instead of it being your automatic default, it becomes one possible response among many. You develop the capacity to recognize when fear-based observation is turning on and choose whether to engage with it or return to open observation. This awareness of your observation patterns, the ability to observe your observation patterns, is the ultimate result of this work. You're no longer identified with your fear-based patterns. You can see them turning on, recognize them as conditioned responses, and choose a different engagement. That choice, used consistently across time, is what creates lasting transformation. Not through forced change or willpower, but through gradually expanding your menu of possible responses to include options beyond defensive observation. The quantum shift begins the moment you stop observing from fear, but it deepens and stabilizes through ongoing commitment to practices that build nervous system capacity, release stored activation, and expand your tolerance for uncertainty. This is the work, not exciting or dramatic, certainly not quick or easy, but genuinely transformative in ways that surface-level approaches to consciousness and bringing things into your life can never touch. You now understand the mechanism. If you watched till now, you're not here by accident. Like to anchor it, comment what clicked, share this gift with one person, and subscribe, because you're ready.